Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this Saturday briefing. It's a crisp 30-minute briefing, so we're relying on everyone. That means my speakers to keep to time, and those of you with questions, I would advise that you keep a mental note of your questions as we go along through, and we should have something like 10 minutes at the end for a bit of Q&A. So, of course, we are all looking forward to that. So the subject of this afternoon's briefing is how independent schools serve their communities. Your children in school are going to need to mix with a wide range of others in future life. So you might be interested to know what your chosen schools are doing to be involved with activities that widen access to all kinds of families so that they give your child the opportunity to experience a whole range of different types of people from different backgrounds. Now, we know that independent schools have a strong sense of civic duty, and all independent schools are embedded in their local communities in a wide range of ways. The Independent Schools Council, which I represent today, reports every year on partnership work between independent and state schools. And there's a website called schoolstogether.org where you can see over 6,500 examples of collaborative work between state schools and independent schools. Of course, we can all learn from each other, and schools are no different. So on today's panel, we have top speakers from top schools who will give you an introduction to the kinds of partnership work and access widening that's going on in 2022 and beyond. And our first speaker this afternoon is Richard Backhouse, the principal of Berkhamsted School and the 2021 to 22 chairman of HMC. Richard, what would you like to tell us?
Thank you, Julie. I'd like to tell you a little bit about bursaries in general and about the approach to them in the Berkhamsted Schools Group, building on what Julia said about the way in which we anticipate that parents will be interested in their children's school being connected to the local community and making sure that it is a representative community, representative of its local community and representative in a more national sense too. In that context, the purpose of bursaries offered by a school is really important. And most schools will declare on their websites what kind of bursaries they offer. And I think it's an important indicator of the character of a school to look at a school's website at the nature of the bursaries they offer. I think bursaries generally come in 4 different forms. There are 100% bursaries that are aimed at diversifying the school population and improving social mobility. There are top-up bursaries for those who are scholars to enable those with particular talents to enter a selective and fee-paying school. There are bursaries that are partial discounts to enable families who can't quite afford the fees in an independent school to afford them. And there are emergency bursaries for children already in the school if parents fall on unpredictable hard times as part of a school's commitment to the well-being of its pupils. And it's advisable to be aware of any school's mix of those bursaries. My perception is nationally that the proportion of bursary funds that are devoted to 100% bursary candidates has significantly increased over the last 10 years. And that's certainly the case in my school over the last 6-7 years while I've been there. The number of 100% bursary candidates has increased. But in my school, all our 100% bursary candidates come through one of our partnerships. I'm not going to say too much about that because I don't want to trespass on the territory of others this afternoon. But we have partnerships with our local, our county virtual schools. They are in charge of looked after children in the county with a multi-academy trust in Luton that run 11 to 16 schools in Luton and with the Royal National Children's Springboard Foundation. In that context, I would advise parents applying for bursaries, a subject I've been asked to touch on briefly, to be very open about their need for a bursary from the start of the process. Schools can often run out of bursary funds during the admission phase. The earlier a parent communicates, the more open a parent's communication, the better that is. And bursaries that are connected to partnerships, in my view, are much more likely to be successful. And the reason for that is that one of the things we insist on is that our bursary pupils go back to their communities to explain what they are achieving via their bursary, raising not only their own achievement, but raising aspirations throughout the community from which they come to the school. Two last things, just as parents, that you may want to look into if you're interested in bursaries. Talk openly to the school about expectations that schools apply to bursary candidates, like our expectation that they will go back and speak in their previous schools and so on, and in relation to extras at the school, trips, additional resources, and so on. And lastly, because I think my time is coming to an end, I would advertise to parents, do talk to schools about the benefits that the school sees from having bursary children. In my view, having ambitious, really hard-working children in a school who model what the kind of approach a child takes to schooling, if their education, their one opportunity to live a different kind of life from the community they've grown up in, those children bring a reality to the experience, the competition with other children that all fee-paying school children, I think, need to experience before they sit in waiting rooms for final shortlist interviews at Bain, Unilever, PwC, or any other blue-chip employer. I will stop there. Am I within my time limit?
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed for that, Richard. And just as a sign of the commitment of schools in the independent sector to bursaries for widening access, it might be helpful to know that last year, £480 million worth of means-tested fees assistance was provided across the sector. So thank you, Richard. Our second speaker is Tom Arbuthnott. Tom is the Deputy Head Partnerships at Eaton College and in his own right, a sector leader in the development and impact of effective partnerships of many kinds. And he's going to tell you about a particularly exciting project at Eaton. Tom.
Yes, thanks, Julie. And I think it's very handy in a way to be able to follow from Richard's extremely clear and highly inspiring talk about bursaries, because in a sense I think that's the kind of effect that we and other schools would hope to have with our school partnerships as well. Essentially, we, like many independent schools, our founding precept is that we're a charity for the promotion of education, and running through that like a muscle is the idea that much of it is about providing transformational educational opportunities. And I think about 20 years ago, we as a school, we started asking ourselves, in common with many others, how do we enact that? Does it all have to be about the brilliant process of taking a child from the world outside and bringing them into our school? Or can we do the same kind of thing in reverse by taking the extraordinary things about our school and sharing them as widely as we possibly can across the education system? And we've done all sorts of things to try and help us to do that. We now have a teaching and learning centre that does lots of educational research, which is shared freely. We have our EatonX digital programme, which is now part of my public benefit programme, which 50,000 kids used from 1,000 different schools during the pandemic. And more particularly, or most particularly, we founded about 10 years ago, we co-founded two state sector free schools. One is a state boarding school near us called Hollyport College, an extraordinary school which got 53% A-star A at A-level this year, but which still educates about 8% of its kids are either in the care system or post-care. It's a state boarding school, so we're a boarding school. The kids are, Hollyport kids are at Eaton all the time, Eaton kids are at Hollyport all the time. It's a wonderful partnership. But in terms of this talk, I'd like to focus more on a school that actually Brighton College led, but we were part of, called the London Academy of Excellence in East London, which is a state post-16 free school. It's very small, so it's only 240 kids a year, but basically it provides a really focused pathway for kids from more disadvantaged backgrounds into either Russell Group universities or into high-tariff courses like medicine, dentistry, veterinary. And it's been extraordinarily successful in doing that over the last 10 years. The project that Julie mentioned is a project that we've been working up over the last 2 or 3 years with this extraordinary state sector partner called Star Academies, who are a multi-academy trust based in Blackburn. We are putting in a bid by the end of this month, by the end of November, to open 3 more schools like the London Academy of Excellence. We hope they're going to have a similar focus. But we're focusing very, very much, as a national charity, we are focusing on cold spot areas outside the southeast. So we're going to bid to open schools in Oldham, in Greater Manchester, in Middlesbrough, in the Tees Valley, and in Dudley in the Black Country. If we're successful, those schools will open later on this decade, 2025, 2026, and we hope that they will take our values as a school and they will help 720 children a year achieve their dreams in terms of the kind of universities they can go to. So for us, that's entirely in keeping with our status and educational foundation. And for our pupils, it's really important to them that they see that we're putting our money where our mouth is, that we're talking about being widely engaged with the wider educational world and trying to create system improvement where you can, that they can see us doing what we're hoping that they will do.
Thank you very much, Tom. So I hope you're getting the impression from our speakers this afternoon that the independent sector is not an inward-looking kind of a sector. It takes very seriously its duty to be part of the broader educational landscape in the country and to provide opportunities for educational enrichment, specialism, and extra capacity across the UK. So when you choose your independent school, as a parent and as a pupil, you're part of something much larger than just that single school. Now, our final speakers this afternoon are a 2-for-1 deal. We have 2 from one school, and that's Jane Lunnon, the head of Alleyn School, and her Director of Partnerships, Ben Jones, and they're going to tell us more about their local links with state schools and partnerships.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Julie, and thank you to the previous speakers for being clear, both of you brilliantly clear and inspiring. It's such a pleasure to be with you today, and thank you, everybody, for gathering up here. So I actually have 2.5 minutes to speak, because we have 5 minutes between us. The good news is I can talk really fast, but hopefully, if there's anything that I say that you don't catch, please do come and ask any one of us afterwards. So my school, Alleyn School, founded 400 years ago, was set up by a brilliant chap called Edward Alleyn, who was a Jacobean and basically an Elizabethan player. He was an actor, and he set up he was then called the College of God's Gift, for 12 poor scholars, the idea being to make a profound difference to the lives of young people in his community 400 years ago. And honestly, that has been at the heart of our school for more than 400 years. It is absolutely our DNA. And what that looks like now is, one, we have a very, very extensive bursary provision. We're very, very fortunate, because Edward Alleyn, as well as setting up a school, also did slightly dodgier things with bear pits and other things, but he made a fortune. He bought quite a lot of the land in London, and that was put into a fund, and that helps to fund our bursary provision. And what that means is we are really fortunate that over 100 kids in our school are in our school on life-changing, transformational bursaries. And that, as Richard said, the difference that makes to the character of our school and the kind of culture that we have in it is absolutely critical, and it's part of who we are, and we cherish it. But the second thing that we do is we run a very extensive partnership provision, and Ben, as you heard, is my Director of Partnerships. He's going to tell you a little bit about that. I just want to say very briefly why we do it. And you know what? We don't just do it in order to attract more kids in for bursaries, although, of course, that is a gain, and we love that. A lot of people who come and get involved in our partnership work from lots of different schools then think, okay, I actually know this place, I could apply, and it doesn't feel daunting. I know the people, they're completely normal human beings when you get through the door. So that's a benefit, but that's not why we do it. And people talk a lot about partnership provision, but I think what we should really just say is a partnership program is just education. It is just about ensuring all children that we work with are able to develop the skills that we know are completely critical to flourishing and thriving in the 21st century. So yes, at Alleyn's we teach maths, but we also, and our kids learn a lot in their maths lessons, for example, but we also think they learn just as much through the partnership activity work that they get involved in. What do partnerships teach them? It teaches them how to manage relationships, how to advocate, how to work together with people from completely different places and backgrounds and family experiences, how to solve problems, how to be creative, how to have confidence, how to research together. Basically, Partnerships are about education, and that is why we invest in them. There is an all in Alleyn's. It has an all at the beginning of it, and we truly believe that our job is to enable kids to be all that they can be. And that is the kids that come to our school, and indeed it's the kids that we are fortunate enough to work with in our partnership programme. So that is what we are about. And the last thing I'm going to say to you before I hand over to Ben, and I get to the end of my 2.5 minutes, is that part of our development, you're going to hear a lot about what we already do, but we also, I've partly appointed Ben, so he's new in the role. We think it's so important that we want to build partnerships not as something that's kind of mucking about on the edges, as a sort of marginal thing that you do if you don't want to do games. We are going to put it into our timetable. So we think it is as important to build a partnership scheme of work in the same way that you have a maths scheme of work, developmental through the school for our kids. Anyway, that's enough from me. Very happy to take questions, but I'll hand over to Ben and he'll give you a bit more detail about it.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. And I think one word Jane didn't mention then, and is the reason why I'm loving what I'm doing in this job, is that our kids have an enormous amount of fun when they're involved with the huge amount of partnership work we're involved with, the huge array of partners. We have 38 partners linked with Alleyn School, various types of institutions, schools, charities, and about 400 of our children are involved at one time or another. And as Jane has said, we'd like that to be closer to 1,200. I've got the best bit now to mention a few of the things that our children are involved in every week, and I start by talking about what I was doing this morning, which was with 50 children from Year 5 from our local primary schools, doing a Saturday maths program. Can you imagine looking at the children, can you imagine anything more awful than a program on Saturday mornings doing maths? It's maths extension. They love it, partly because they're supported by 20 of our Year 11s who mentor them. And very soon, they're going to be able to do that from home as we launch a mentoring app. So they'll be able to support these young mathematicians from a range of local schools from home as well. Let me mention the Alleyn's Academy, which is another one of our partnership outreach programs, where each week about 100 children from years 3, 4, and 5 come into school. The place is full of excited sportsmen and women of that age group who are supported by our staff, supported by many of our children. They obviously learn a number of new sports. We have a summer school every summer for about 70 or 80 children, again supported by our children acting as mentors. We have a volunteering program. Each week we take children our kids to an old people's home, to a local community fridge. Hugely enriching and life-changing. How else could we do such? How else could these children learn those sorts of skills without these wonderful partnership activities? And let me mention one more thing. We're building global partnerships, including one wonderfully in the Ukraine. There's a school in Lviv who is sending us videos at the moment, the children showing us the experiences they're having in their city. And we're establishing another relationship with a school in Florida, an academic project where our children will be interacting with academic projects and then going to visit Florida and them over here in due course. There's a lot going on. It's a lot of fun.
It sounds very exciting. Thank you very much from Alleyn's. So you've heard all sorts of different ideas from this extremely auspicious panel in front of you, and I want you to have the best opportunity in our remaining 10 minutes to interact with them if you have any specific questions of your own. Now, some of you are here at the show to help yourselves select the right school for you and your family. You're going to be interested in not just the curriculum, but the sorts of things we were talking about today, the developing of life skills, opportunities, enrichment, and character building. So does anyone have a question for any specific member of the panel or for all of us to consider on the general theme of partnerships? But they're a very wise panel, so I'm sure they can be flexible. Any questions? Yes, I would. Just sending a microphone to you.
Thank you very much for your Etonian model of trying to set up academies across the country. I'm just trying to look at, are you considering other non-academic involvement like sports or people coming down to your Olympic-sized swimming pool and other facilities that you have that may be not directly academic, but enhances the limited facilities that exist in state school? Thank you.
Yes, of course we do. I didn't have, in 5 minutes, I didn't have the chance to really look at lots of our local partnership work, because in a sense it echoes very much what Alleyn's are doing. We don't have an Olympic-sized swimming pool, but we do have an Olympic rowing lake. And we have which was where the rowing events were in 2012, and we have a very, very active outreach rowing program. So every year there's a rowing summer school. There are 40 free places, particularly for kids from the local area, from Slough, and thereabouts. And there's a weekly rowing club, which involves lots and lots of kids from the local community having a chance to use it. And just like, as Ben was saying, one of the lovely things is that our students, our boys, are out there every Sunday working with those local kids, helping them learn to row and to build on it. So that's just one example, but there's loads going on.
Thank you for your question. Next question.
Hi, it's an absolute pleasure, and thank you so much for sharing the great work you're doing. I just want to check whether Tom will recognize me. I want to say thank you particularly to Eaton for the extraordinary work you're doing, not just on our children who win the oral scholarship, but also the impact and the very independent young man and socially conscious young men you release back to us. And this has a huge impact on Stratford. It's not just a London Academy of Excellence, but also the millions you've spent on our Stratford children. We can see the difference you're making. And we want to say thank you to you, to Dulwich, to Islands. But I have a particular thank you to Tom Arbuthnott for the amazing, tireless work you're doing. You gave me back a very independent young person who has exactly what you're saying. He's continuing to work extremely hard in the community, in a way that you taught him for the last few years he's been with you on 115% bursary. So thank you. The question I want to ask is now, you're doing extraordinary work, all of you. This is for everybody. But we've got a chunk of children who are on EOTAS, education otherwise on school, and children who are on education at home. There's young people, unfortunately, cannot benefit from what you're doing because they're not in school, and they need to be referred by schools. So we want to know whether there will be a program that will pick up those young people who either emotionally have been damaged through exclusions or through other means, can no longer be in school. How can we integrate those young children? And again, I say a standing ovation to Eaton for the work you're doing. Thank you. Thank you, Tom.
Well,
I'll let you know who I am.
It's Isata, isn't it? Of course it is, yeah. So Isata's son, Musa, is, just to repay some of the sort of golden words you said about us, he came from a school in East London, going back to what Richard was saying about schools in Luton, called Royal Liberty School. And the first thing he did when he arrived with us was to set up his own charity called Bridge That Gap, which was all about trying to encourage more boys from his background, so from his school, to have a go at the Orwell Award in the sixth form. And so far, 4 boys have come from that school, entirely as a result of Musa's work. So, talking about the ripple effect that Richard mentioned, I think Isata and Musa really exemplify and enact that.
Thank you for a great question. I don't know the answer to your question, but what I do know is that in our circumstance, I went to County Hall and I said, what would it look like in my county if we were good for the county? And they said, we'd really like you to work with our looked after children. So we run a booster camp for looked after children in years 10, 11 and 12. They come and stay residentially in our school over the Easter holidays and in the summer. Our staff volunteer to work with them, teaching them, developing them. They do high ropes, they do public presentations, self-confidence work, and they get booster sessions in all their subjects. And I'm delighted to say that our caterers cater for them entirely free. They regard it as part of their pro bono work. We use other people in the community to help. There's an enormous amount of goodwill, and we are just the people who are able to tie that goodwill together. And the reason we do that is that is what the council the county council said would be best for us to do. So I think it's important that independent schools don't assume they can do things better than the other agencies. Very often there are public agencies that we would be better to work alongside, and we need to approach those humbly and say, what does our help best look like for you? We don't always have the answers to all the problems around us, but we are certainly willing to join in and do what we can to help those who know how to solve them.
Can I just come in on that as well? So just two things I would just observe, and again, fantastic question, and how wonderful to have somebody here who can speak so more persuasively than any of us, I think, about the impact of really, really effective bursary work. And Tom is a complete legend. I think we all agree with that. Anyway, I would just say two things. Firstly, one of the projects that we have just started this year is the Alleyn's Digital Academy. And the idea of that is to foster in children, yes, our own children, but also kids who could not possibly access this in their own context, the skills of coding and digital entrepreneurship. And there is no reason at all why that can't be something that is accessible online for kids who feel they cannot be in a space for whatever reason. So that's the first thing I would say. We're really, really excited about that. There's loads of research to say that the best way to tackle social mobility is to give the skills of digital entrepreneurship to kids, because that is the keys to the kingdom. The second thing I would say is another part of my life is that I am a trustee of the Royal Springboard Foundation, which actually Richard mentioned. Now, we are engaged in incredibly important work right now. Basically, this is a foundation that places kids into independent schools and on life-changing bursaries. And it's been doing it for 20 years, actually, mainly in the boarding sector, but increasingly, as of last year, in the day sector as well. And the thing that's really exciting, and why I'm so glad you asked your question, is that the really big focus now is that the attention turns to looked after children and extremely vulnerable children, because again, all the research says that if you want to find the category of kids for whom outcomes are always worst in life, in every single measure in life, it is looked after children. And therefore, I think the independent sector, we all feel very strongly that that is where we do need to be looking in terms of our charitable work. So, because that is the way we can make a really big difference to the needs of society at large. So, thank you very much for asking that question.
Thank you. We've just got time for one more question, so it's going to be a corking question, this last one. Over to you, madam.
Nothing like pressure. Mine is more of an observation than a question, and really I wanted to salute each of you on the panel for everything you're doing, both in terms of talking here this afternoon, but also the work that you're doing within your schools. And I think it is absolutely fantastic, but not unique to your schools, but obviously across many other of your colleagues in the private sector. And I think that it is so important that this is on the agenda this afternoon, but even more important that this is a narrative that should be going out into the media. And I think the flip side of that is such a negative narrative in terms of, yes, the privilege of the private sector, and that those of us who have put our children through that are, it's all about privilege. But actually the very important point that you've made this afternoon is about that sense of social responsibility. And if we're looking at the change makers of tomorrow, the leaders of the workplace and society, they absolutely need to get it. So I salute each of you for what you're doing. I'm really pleased it's on the agenda. And can we have a bit more about this in the media and the narrative, so that we change that so it's a positive narrative than a narrative about haves, have-nots, and privilege versus responsibility.
I might take that question, because the Independent Schools Council exists to help promote good stories, and you're absolutely right, the current news agenda is particularly negative. As it happens, next week is our Partnerships Week, and we're going to be promoting this kind of story all the way across social media. Please go on social media, please tag us. We've got hashtags Schools Together and Power of Partnerships, that's correct. And we're doing that next week for that exact reason, to try to raise awareness of all the good work that independent schools do, because too often our sector is characterised by an outdated stereotype, and it's very unhelpful, because the reality of our schools is they are warmly outward-facing, keen to be embracing the fullest possible community around them, and that's much more useful to society than the current negative news agenda. So I don't know whether I might just go around my panel now just for one last comment. It could be on how to promote this good work more effectively, or it could be anything else they wish to say as a closing comment. But thank you very much for that. I'm sure we all agree, everyone here in this session, that we are in this together to support children and to make the world a better place through partnership. And it's a positive thing. Tom?
I think my closing thought would be that you've heard a lot from independent schools today, but I think it's really important that we hear the views of state schools as well. And I'm absolutely certain that if you were speaking to any of Alleyn's school partners, they'd be up here saying what a brilliant thing these partnerships are. And I think what we have to do as a sector is we have to unleash those voices from the state sector, either through multi-academy trusts or through our individual partners, who can show not only that what we are doing together is making a difference to their kids, but also what they are doing is making a difference to our schools. Because without reciprocity, there is no such thing as partnership.
Can I release one of those voices with a quote from one of the teachers of one of our partner schools, one of the local primary schools, who said this: one of our pupils, who was a school refuser last year, came to one of the events that I was describing, interacting with our children. He completely loved it and was utterly transformed. So that is a voice released.
And I would just mention that I think what you say is incredibly important. It would be lovely to have fair and balanced reporting of all these things that we're doing. There are occasions, though, when I think it's important in independent schools that we don't say too much about what we're doing. For example, when we help local state schools with preparation of children for the most selective universities, I think it's important that we still let those schools take the credit for the successful outcome. It would be inappropriate of us, I think, to appear to be claiming that where the state school had successes, somehow that's because of our help. And on those scores, I think it's often the case that independent schools choose to remain silent so that the partner that they are helping is able to take the credit. I think that's important too.
And I would say just one final thing. I've been reflecting a lot on what's happening in the world, and I think one of the things that makes the 21st century such an incredibly exciting time to be alive, challenging, yes, certainly the last couple of years, but also really exciting, is the way there is huge kind of fluidity and all the boundaries and borders seem to be merging and blurring a little bit. And I think, you know what, when this narrative really lands and really connects and engages, we won't be talking about different types of school. We'll just be talking about great education reaching our kids, whichever way works. And I've been really moved, actually, by the number of kids there are in this audience. And I just wish you all the very best. I hope you have a lot of fun in your education, and I hope you are enabled to be the very best that you can be. And good luck with it.
And that's a very good point on which to end this session. Thank you so much for joining us. Please join me in thanking our excellent panel. And thank you for coming.